Matthew Spencer, Green Alliance, thanks for joining us here at the EIC annual conference. Interesting start to the conference today, and of course we just heard from the Minister, we're now in the environment of a Tory government, it's not the coalition. I suppose what's different for you? Should we be worried?
There clearly are some concerns. There are two concerns I would have. One is that the government appear to be taking more of a compliance approach to the environment, i.e. doing the minimum necessary to meet legal obligations, rather than a more dynamic entrepreneurial approach to creating new markets, new business models. I hope we can change that over the coming years, but there's definitely a compliance mentality has emerged. Secondly, as has been widely reported, there's been some notable incoherence, particularly on low carbon policy, where on the face of it, government want to pursue the cheapest options, but then they're not doing very much on energy efficiency or some of the cheapest renewables. So I believe that the Amber Rudd has started to get some building blocks in place for our energy policy. So let's hope she can do that across the broader range of issues.
But you were saying that if every country was doing what we were doing around low carbon renewable energy, then we would have a big problem in terms of meeting climate change objectives. I mean, should we be worried?
I didn't say that. I think that was somebody else. I think the UK is really strong on some things.
Right.
We are the first country in the world to phase out coal, or the earliest country to phase out coal, and that's an act of international leadership. We have we've made a decent contribution to climate finance for the poorest countries in the world to adapt to climate change, and we did have some very strong policies on low carbon energy. Some of those are still intact, but many of them have been lost. And so I think the job is to rebuild some coherence and confidence in the low carbon sector.
But you did say that we were making progress towards hitting our climate change objectives. I suppose what makes you say that? It's presumably it's a long game, but we are getting there, you say?
Well, we've managed to persuade the rest of Europe to adopt targets very similar to our own in the UK. Yeah. We're doing reasonably well on our carbon emissions targets in the short term. Where the questions arise is our ability to meet them in the 2020s. Yeah. We've had some clarification that offshore wind can now be part of that in the 2020s, which is very helpful. We have absolutely no decent policy on energy efficiency in buildings, and that is a yawning gap in our policy.
Right. Staying in Europe is important for you?
Well, the European Union has been an environment union. It's the biggest body of environment policy anywhere in the world. And so the questions that everyone has to ask themselves is, how could you possibly replicate that if we left the European Union? And my suspicion is that if you didn't have the EU, you'd have to reinvent it for that reason. It is a powerful environment union. It has some weaknesses and some notable deficits, but overall it's improved the UK environment massively.
Okay. I suppose finally, this government is all about driving growth, driving the economy. How does the EIC and its membership really engage with that agenda? What does it have to do?
Well, I think the EIC plays a great role in telling the story of how environmental technology and services is already part of the UK's growth story. Yeah. It's been one of the sectors that's grown strongest through the recession, and it continues to perform very well despite some of the uncertainty we've had over the last few months in policy terms. So I think telling the story, making the case at a local constituency level as well as nationally is the key to making sure that politics understands that this is now part of our economy. It's not an add-on.
Okay, Matthew, thanks very much for joining us today.
You're welcome.
Thanks a lot.